welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis. With me, as always, is Dave. Dave?
Oh, hey, man. What's happening? Oh, you see the river from here. It's nice.
Go back. Go back home. Dave?
I'm here. Give me a second. Oh, I'm here. Boy, are my arms tired. Waka, waka, waka.
You winged in from the coast. For those of you who couldn't guess by Dave's Waka Waka Waka, we are covering the Muppet Movie from 1979.
Which is why I was thinking about coming in like this.
That unmistakable Muppet cadence. For those of you listening, this is why we decided to do the Muppet Movie. It was a spur of the moment thing because Dave was just visiting New York, which is where we shot the opening to this episode, because he had a meeting at his job, which is
at Sesame Street, or the Children's Television Workshop, which handles everything Sesame Street.
A reason that you and I are both the people we are today, the Children's Television Workshop.
Absolutely.
So how long have you worked for Sesame Street specifically?
You know, I'm terrible at details. That's why I partnered up with you. I kind of expected you to go, Dave's been working with Sesame Street for this long. No.
Right. Yeah, I've got your resume all up here.
Yeah. Close to 15, I think. Maybe 15 exactly.
That's great.
Yeah. It's a social media success story. It was called 60 Days of Illustrator, and I posted one tutorial that I did every day. And a friend who was currently working at Sesame Street saw it, was keeping an eye on it, and when she liked how it was going, she passed it off to a boss of hers. And then that boss liked the initiative, and they called me in for an interview.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, no, the rest is history. That's how I got that job.
You never told me that. That's awesome. You know what? That is a wonderful story. That is, like you say, a social media success story. It's also a terrible thing to put out in the world because everyone who posts anything on social media thinks that's how it works. And you are really the man bites dog story. You are the opposite of how it actually works. That's a miracle.
I couldn't agree more. Do not rely on that. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. So Dave visited. I'm just going to throw up a picture of him and his buddy Elmo.
Yeah. Please throw that up there.
Is it where is Sesame Street? 900 Broadway, something like that?
1900 Broadway.
1900 Broadway. That is such a cool shot. I love that shot.
When I was getting that picture with Elmo was unpacked and posed for me by Lewis Henry Mitchell, who is the creative director of character design at Sesame Street or Sesame Workshop.
Legend. This
guy is so impressive. He draws these characters. He creates these characters. He poses these characters. He's like a Swiss Army knife artist. It's so impressive.
And also, very quickly, before we get into the movie, will you please tell the quick story of how you, quote unquote, met Jim Henson?
I was actually friends with one of Jim's kids, Johnny Henson, who's no longer with us.
Rest in peace.
He always wanted to throw a party at the house, and his dad always said no. And then when Jim was having lots of success, they decided to move to a bigger, nicer house. Jim said, okay, Johnny, we're moving out. Pack up all the furniture, and then you can throw your party. And he threw a party, and a lot of people went, and me and a few friends stuck around till the end. Jim came in to sort of inspect the damage or to make sure there wasn't too much. And some of us were all sitting on a couch, and Jim walked by, and he turned and looked at us. And if I had to guess, I think he said, hey, fellas. One of my friends said, isn't that the guy who made Alf? He's not.
No.
So we all elbowed or punched that kid.
Wow.
And then Jim went through the room and found Johnny and talked to Johnny. And but that was it. Jim walking by, hey, fellas.
And it was unmistakably Jim, right? The beard.
That's the thing. It was unmistakably Jim in that 6 foot something, the beard. The shirt may have been like green corduroy. You know,
not the pants, the shirt.
Yeah, just like he was just like dressed. head to toe PBS, you know?
Oh, wow.
Couple of tote bags with them. No, just kidding.
Oh, that's great. That story by Dave was made possible by a grant from the Chubb Group
And the Helena
and the
Rubinstein
Helena
Foundation.
Rubinstein Foundation. Okay, we are ready to launch into the Muppet Movie. I know at least one person, Dave, your lady Chrissy, will be very excited by this episode. But I think the Muppets in general have a rabid fan base, correct?
I absolutely agree. And that's why we're doing this. We're chasing viewers.
Oh yeah, that's how we make our decisions. Sure, that's why we're on top of the heap. Please yourself last. Um, so the Muppet Movie is from 1979. It was directed by James Frawley. First of all, James Frawley, I knew his name first because he was a director in a lot of the Monkees episodes, and I'm a big Monkees fan, as you know.
That kind of makes sense.
But he's a director and an actor, and he's in the Muppet Movie. He was the waiter in the sleaze bucket or whatever, that sleazy cafe. Yeah. He's just got that wonderful character actor look about him. And I think he did a great job here. The movie was written by Jerry Jewell, who of course was head writer for the Muppets TV show seasons 2 through 5, and had a hand in most of the movies. He's pretty much the voice of the Muppets, some people call him. At least their sensibility, their sense of humor after Jim.
Yeah. Things like the Muppets need that. It's like guardian.
Yes, gatekeeper. You know? And it was also co-written by Jack Burns, who is head writer of The Muppet Show for season 1, but I know him through stand-up. He was the original partner when he worked in 2 with George Carlin. They have an album of them at the Playboy Club from back in the 60s. And he was partners with Avery Schreiber, this heavy-set dude with black curly hair and a big black mustache, who was on The Muppet Show. Guy. Yeah, he would be on Match Game. He would be on Hollywood Squares. He was just very 70s celebrity. Jack Burns was also a writer on Fridays, the kind of rival of Saturday Night Live, at least for a little bit. But anyway, those guys did a fantastic job because people forget this was taking the Muppets that had only existed on a TV show and putting them on the large screen. And so it had to be bigger, and you had to show them things they couldn't get on the TV show. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, this is the first time we saw Muppets with legs.
At the time, all the articles, the general vibe was the Muppets now with legs.
Yeah, I'll tell you what's crazy about that. It's the first time we see Muppets with legs. It's the first time we see Kermit with legs, and he's using them. He's riding a bike. He's running around. And what is the plot of this film? It's a guy who owns, or at least the driving mechanism of this film, is a fried frog's legs magnate, Let's say Colonel Sanders of
Colonel
frog's legs.
Sanders, yes, of frog's legs.
Right down to the little southern tie, who wants more than anything to get Kermit the Frog to be a pitch man.
A pitch man,
for his franchise of Frog's Legs. It's so absurd when you lay it down like that. But how many milk companies have like a laughing cow on their, or cheese companies?
The barbecue joints with the pig with a knife and a fork, like, hey, let's eat. What are we having?
Yeah, eat my family. Like, what is that shit? Full disclosure, I'm a vegan, so that thing is kind of anathema to me. But in general, that is just an illogical kind of thing.
Yeah, it's always struck me as bizarre.
So in thinking about this movie, and I think when we came up with the idea that we were going to do it, all I remembered about it was that it always struck me as a kind of fuzzy Wizard of Oz, where, you have Kermit as this, simple, not farm, but swamp creature who,
similar, but different.
Yeah. Who is like going off in search of greater things, of stardom, following the rainbow, as it were, and picking up a cast of characters along the way that also believe in his dream and want to join him on his journey.
Yeah, little Luke Skywalker. I'm living in a quiet place. I have bigger ideas. I think I need a bigger place to get them off the ground. And then you start your journey, and along the way, people are inspired by your attempt. And if they are in a similar position, they're tempted to say, this is a good moment for me to make my attempt, snowballing your little group of people into a bunch who are all trying to make it.
Yeah. And I mean, as is the way it works in the real world, the more people you have around you that are kind of sharing in this positivity and like, oh, won't it be great? And we're going to do this and that, the greater the possibility of the outcome of your dream. You know, they all kind of feed each other. That's why I love to work in groups and with people. You need to pick each other up at certain
Yeah.
points.
Rudy Ray Moore took his whole squad with him.
Yep.
He's like, I got guys for this. I don't need to make any phone calls.
Hmm.
He had his in place from living his life, but Kermit finds them along the way, the friends he made along the way.
Right. Let's get into the movie. It's very interesting how this movie has a framing device. We open up not in the actual world of the movie, but we open up at the premiere, the screening for the Muppets of the Muppet Movie. It is a
Meta.
finished film. Yeah, very meta, breaking that fourth wall of the movie. And Kermit is about to screen it. He is obviously the impresario. He's the director, the creator of things. Piggy's like, no one needs to hear you. And so he sits
Right?
down and they begin it. And right out of the gate, we find Kermit in the swamp, and you get the
The
first
first,
of the
yeah.
great songs by Paul Williams and Kenneth Asher, Rainbow Connection.
Yeah. A beloved song, redone by lots of people. It's a good number.
It's the quintessential Muppet song. It's the one that people
Yeah.
think of. It's iconic.
Yeah, I would put It's Not Easy Being Green up against it.
Mm.
Um,
But It Ain't Easy Being Green is so specific to Kermit.
yeah, if you're not a fan, or if you're a little too old to have started on Sesame Street, you're not gonna know It's Not Easy Being Green.
Mhm.
Whereas the Rainbow Connection has made it to, you might even get people who are like, "Oh, I love that song. What is that from?"
Right. So we meet Kermit. He's in the swamp. He's playing a banjo. We see his legs. We see his arms moving up and down on the banjo, and his right hand hitting the strings. It's oddly precisioned.
And what year is
Um,
it?
1979.
Worth mentioning. Like, you can see all this stuff in 2024 and be like, "What's your point?" It's like, we
Yeah.
see Godzilla, he's toasting marshmallows, but this is 1979, and it's a puppet on a log,
Sitting on a log in water.
surrounded by a swamp, surrounded by
Yeah.
water.
Just very well done.
Yeah, really well
Um,
done. And I don't know, are you about to say, like, why this is possible, or?
if you know specifically, I assume he's underneath in an air tank.
Yeah, it's like practically a diving bell, in that it's a tube that where the water's been pumped out of the tube, and Jim is jammed in it. There's
Jammed in it and performing like a boss.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really small space, and Jim is a big guy, and he's killing the performance and all that personality while
Mhm.
he's doing this, while he's jammed in there.
And I just want to remind people that's Jim Henson singing as Kermit. He's not talking, he's singing.
Yeah.
You know, not everybody that gets into puppetry and they can do funny voices and create characters can also sing as those characters. So it bears repeating, he's doing a lot of great things all at
And
once.
when you're talking about this business, this puppet business, that's all you're going to run into over and over again. It's just people like astronomers who make their own lenses. It's not enough that you discovered planets, or that
Mhm.
but you did it with telescopes that you handcrafted lenses for.
Mhm.
These guys all operate that way. They're artists who are their own engineers of their tools. And
It's like you mentioned with Lewis Henry Mitchell. Back in the day, all of these Henson Company people, they were all Swiss Army knives to a degree. They
yeah,
all had to
yeah.
wear a lot of hats at once and spell each other and like back up each other and join in and switch characters if somebody else went on to something. So it was a really well-rounded, talented group of people.
You'd have 20 people for each puppet. Instead, just hire wildly talented geniuses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of those laying around.
I also get the impression with this group, and I don't know it for sure, but it seems like the kind of environment where the good idea always wins, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. And I think
Yeah,
that's how the greatest work is created. So, okay, the amazing performance of Kermit doing Rainbow Connection, it leads us to our first of a million cameos in this movie, and it's Dom DeLuise, my beloved Dom DeLuise.
We love Dom
We loved
DeLuise.
from Fatso, one of the greatest comedies ever made, directed by Anne Bancroft, from Cannonball Run, which we both grew up loving. He was ubiquitous in the 70s, teamed up with Burt Reynolds or otherwise. But
Yeah. But I mean, he made the outtakes from Cannonball Run the most famous outtakes ever.
yeah. Oh, he's
Yeah.
just great. And he gave us Peter DeLuise. So
Fantastic in Stargate.
there it is. Dom DeLuise plays a theatrical agent from Hollywood who is on his vacation, I guess, just in a rowboat in a swamp.
Alone. Yeah.
Alone with a copy of Variety that just so happens to have an ad in it that is looking for singing, performing frogs, which means nothing to Kermit until DeLuise tells him that he could make millions of people happy.
Stops
And
Kermit dead
that's
in his
what
tracks.
stops
Yep.
him dead. That's what gets
Yep.
him. How beautiful and pure of heart is Kermit?
Yeah. Always has been. Kermit, man. He's the Bill Murray of puppets.
Oh, God. He's not a bully boy. What are you doing? He's a sweetheart.
Give me a second.
All right.
He is a friend of the downtrodden.
Mm-hmm.
He's a cheerleader of people who don't have faith in themselves. And when Fozzie says to Dr. Teeth's band, "I don't know how to thank you," Kermit says, "I don't know why to thank you."
He's funny.
Because he's also snarky. Gonna give him just a dash of Bill Murray.
All right, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Bill,
Okay.
let's be specific. And if you've listened
Bill
to this
Murray and
podcast,
meatballs.
if you've listened to this podcast from the beginning, you realize Dave is speaking only of Bill Murray and meatballs.
You know what? I just should have said Tripper. That's
You
all.
should have said Tripper.
You wouldn't have argued with me.
Yeah. So that is enough to sell Kermit. He sets off to Hollywood and he begins his journey on a bicycle. So we see his legs, and I was watching very closely, Dave. I did not see any strings, any poles, any kind of movie magic. Granted, I was watching it closely in 2024. There might have been some work done after
That's
the
true.
fact in post.
Yeah.
But even if there was, you can always tell something. This was fair. This was seamless today. And I'm sure it was fairly seamless back in the day. And it's wonderful to see him riding this bicycle.
Yeah, and you think about the makers of the movie are like, they're like, okay, we are gonna get all the Muppets in the theater. Everybody was used to all the Muppets in the theater because you got the Muppet Show.
Right.
They're like, well, we'll start off in familiar territory, and then there's got this 1-2 punch. There's the Rainbow Connection, which is just solid, and then they're like, all right, let's start the show. Kermit rides into the scene on a bicycle. That's the second shot, and that is just, you got him. And for a movie that was like promising legs for the past 2 years while you were waiting for it to come out, that's getting the legs like so perfect. Like, oh my God, not only does he have legs, he's not sitting there with his legs crossed, he's riding a bicycle.
Yeah. I think Roger Ebert lost his mind back when he first saw it about the legs.
Yeah. I think I even remember seeing that.
So he's well on his way. And while it's on his bicycle, he encounters another human in the film, Austin Pendleton. And I said in an early episode, I think 1 out of every 5 friends I had growing up in New York ended up studying with Austin Pendleton at like HB Studios or one of the acting schools here in New York. He is fantastic. He's almost like a Muppet himself, Austin Pendleton. He works for the Fried Frog Legs magnate. He's kind of like the Guy Friday. And he tells him about this amazing frog just because he admires him. And like, yeah, he can ride a bike, he can sing, he can talk, he can whatever. Kermit's bike is smashed by a steamroller, runs over his bike. Yeah. Kermit avoids being killed because he has these wonderful jumping legs. He ends up on the roof. But that was enough to put him on the radar of the Fried Frog's Legs magnate. So he is now pursuing him. Kermit continues his journey and he stops for food at a bar, kind of like the Sleaze Cafe, is it?
El Sleazo Cafe.
Oh, that's so much better.
Even better, yeah.
The El Sleazo Cafe. And that is where he meets Fozzie Bear. Fozzie Bear is doing a horrible act. Somehow he has this gig. He said it was like his 3rd time. And I
Yeah.
assume it went well enough the first 2 times, but the crowd is very antagonistic. Our buddy Paul Williams, my beloved Paul Williams, is the piano player who created the music for here. We've Only Just Begun, Evergreen. He's a fantastic songwriter. Paul Williams plays the piano while Kermit, trying to save Fozzie's act, jumps up and they do kind of a song and dance together.
Kermit gives him the classic, like, hey, play something snappy.
Right.
Yeah.
Which he does.
Yeah.
And then Kermit and Fozzie are physically assaulted by the audience. At one point, Kermit is thrown up, gets caught in the ceiling fan. The guy even increases the voltage on the ceiling fan. He goes around.
What was that all about? He laughs maniacally when he does it. I don't think it was.
Yeah, it's mean.
Yeah.
Fozzie's thrown into the piano. And I was just reminded of what kids were like when I was growing up, of how much kids could take, of how real you could be with kids. You can't get away with half of that quote unquote violence today.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, we understood about pain. We understood about death. We understood about, oh, be careful. Well, what do you want? You went in the Sleazo Cafe. Like, we understood that as kids.
I think we also understood that Muppets were sort of magical in a way, and that you could pick one up and swing it over your head and throw it. They also had the advantage of the fact that they were coming off the Muppet Show, which the Muppet Show was a lot of violent gags.
They could push the envelope more because they were a British show, really. And you could get away with more than you could with American audiences.
Yeah. In fact, all the U.S. companies turned it down.
Yeah. So Fozzie Bear, obviously, he gets out of this violence by saying the drinks are on the house. And then
Everybody goes on the house.
James Frawley has the waiter and all of the rest of the people in the bar go up on the house and they're like, what? The bartender said it was on the house. And I'm like, the waiter works there. He knows what it means. And he's the one with the line, like, what? The bartender said it was. So, and Fozzie's like, works every time. So the two of them get moving. Fozzie drives Kermit. Fozzie at first doesn't want to go. Kermit's like, okay, and says nothing. And then Fozzie, after a beat, is like, okay, you convinced me. And he goes with him. And then Dave, Rainbow Connection gets all the pub, but my jam is Moving Right Along.
Chrissy, too. Yeah, she loves it. Dug-a-dum, dug-a-dum.
Yeah, moving right along. Dug-a-dum, dug-a-dum.
Dug-a-dum, yeah.
Footloose and fancy free. Like, it's so upbeat and charming. And it's got the feel of like, Train Kept a Rollin' by the Yardbirds, like has that chugging train-like feel.
But it's Muppet-esque.
It's jaunty, like a Muppet.
Move right along, dum-a-dum. Is it right before the song where Fozzie says, like, a bear in his natural habitat? It's a Studebaker.
It's in the middle of the song. There's like a breakdown.
Even better. Yeah.
He's like, take it, Fozzie. Like, yeah. Oh, it's great. And they're driving this ancient Studebaker. Was it like a 49 or something? It's like, and it's gorgeous.
It's reminiscent of the Rogue's hearse.
Yeah.
From the Warriors.
Made from a simpler
Two similar cars. Yeah.
We're skipping cameos.
You missed Coburn.
The El Sleazo Cafe owner is James Coburn. How cool is that? And an El Sleazo patron is Madeline Kahn, who looks the same as she did in Blazing Saddles. And Telly Savalas is El Sleazo Tough.
And who is the woman who responds to Myth?
Myth. Yes. Carol Kane from Taxi and everywhere, looking gorgeous. Young Carol Kane.
Freaking Star Trek Brave New World, by the way.
Oh.
She's like 1,000 years old in that. And no offense to Miss Kane. She plays a character who is like 1,000 years old.
Does she look similar to her character in The Princess Bride? Because she was very old.
Oh, yeah. I guess she does a little. Yeah. She'll always be Simca to me.
Right. So they're moving right along. And on the side of the road, who but Big Bird, classic Big Bird, played by Carol Spinney, the Big Bird, not even hitching. He's walking in the other direction.
Opposite direction.
And they stop and they're like, hey, can we give you a ride? And he says, no, thanks. I'm on my way to New York to try to make it in public television. Oh, how great is that? And Fozzie gives him a little like, oh, yeah, good luck with that. Like,
right. Yeah, totally. Like it's a couple of guys on their way to Hollywood. There's a billion of those. This giant bird on his way to make it in public television is so good. And in the credits, it says Big Bird by permission of
Uh,
Sesame Workshop or something. And it reminds you of that division between Sesame Street and
right. People think it was like wildly incestuous, but it really
yeah.
wasn't.
No,
It had
yeah,
its own universes.
somebody had to make a call. Somebody working on the Muppet Movie said, make a call
Hmm.
and see if we can get permission and see if we can get Carol Spinney in here and do Big Bird.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
you know what? Big Bird is a celebrity, no different than James Coburn, no different than Madeline Kahn.
Yeah.
You go through proper channels.
And that's why I consider him one of the cameos in the movie. I
He
don't
is.
consider him a Muppet in the movie. He's a cameo in the movie.
Yeah, he's a guest star. So Fozzie and Kermit are being hotly pursued. They pull into a church. Rather, it's no longer a church, but it's being used by the band Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. And the song is Can You Picture That?
Yeah.
I love that song.
Oh, yeah, of
My
course.
second favorite after moving right along.
The song itself, can you picture that? I just wanted to mention it popped in my head. It reminded me a little bit of Reasons to Be Cheerful. It's like a list song. It's
Yeah.
like raindrops on kittens.
My favorite things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's Can You Picture That? I'm a big
Oh,
fan of those list songs. I like
such
that.
a well-written song. It's really good.
It's a good one. It's another
Um,
good one.
I'm going to run down the band and who does what. So you have Dr. Teeth, voiced by Jim Henson. We had said we believe it's based on Dr. John and his whole kind of night tripper persona. But he's got a Leon Russell hat, which I think is a nice.
Yeah, which also makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and a gold
Yeah.
tooth. So he's like,
Mhm.
he's just so cool.
Amalgam, if you will.
An amalgam. And
Yeah.
a lot of these are amalgams, a lot of these
Oh,
band
absolutely. Yeah.
members. Which brings us to Animal, voiced by Frank Oz. He is the drummer. And I like to believe that he is a mix of Keith Moon, because he's my
Obviously.
all-time favorite drummer of all time.
Yeah.
He's got that wild style. And Mick Fleetwood, the long, gangly arms and legs and the beard and the eyes.
Sure. Yeah. I
Um,
can picture those photos.
An Animal is chained. And I think Keith Moon would still be with us today if someone had chained him. And he has a keeper, Floyd Pepper
Yeah.
is his keeper, the bass
Whoa.
player. And Floyd Pepper, obviously from Pink Floyd and Sgt. Pepper, he's voiced by Jerry Nelson and the main lead singer a lot of times. He is obviously, if you look at his face, he's Skunk Baxter from Steely
Mhm.
Dan and the Doobie Brothers.
With a jacket.
A Sgt. Pepper
From
jacket.
Sgt.
basically.
Pepper's. Yeah.
And I
yeah.
think he's also got a little Ringo Starr in him. They're amalgams, and they're great amalgams.
And I'd throw some Dr. Johnny Fever on that guy.
Oh, God. Yeah. You can
I
throw
mean,
it both ways, actually.
Yeah, you can. You absolutely
Yeah.
can. They both have one pair of sunglasses.
Yeah. They share them when one's going on the air and one's going off day and night. I just love that Animal has a handler, and they walk him. They're like, oh, we got to get him some water. We got to get, like, what?
Yeah.
We could unpack Animal for an hour, so let's not. There's Janice, which is voiced in the film, is voiced by Richard Hunt. It used to be a
Mhm.
lady, but she's very much looks like Mary Travers from Peter, Paul and Mary, the folk act.
Mhm.
But she also has a bit of Joni Mitchell, a bit of Janice.
Yeah.
She's a flower child, a valley girl. She's a lot of things.
Yeah.
And the final member of the initial band is Zoot, who's the
Mm-hmm.
saxophone man, played by David Goles. I understand he's based on Gatto Barbieri, Latin jazz musician. Not much of a talker. He lets his sax do the talking. And they play him as kind of an airhead. They say his record Skip the Groove or something in the movie.
Yeah, Floyd is also somewhat in charge of him. Wake up, Zoot.
I think Floyd has the biggest ego in the group. I think,
Yeah.
according to
yeah.
him, he's in charge of everybody.
Right.
Probably.
Yeah. Nobody's been overlooked. Everybody is so well thought out.
It takes a team to have this kind of detail. It's also in this scene where the Muppets show that they're never afraid to go meta. Kermit and Fozzie hand over the script to the Muppet Movie. And they're like, well, what happened? How'd you guys meet up? Where are you going? And he's like, Fozzie starts to tell the story. And Kermit is like, Fozzie, no, that's boring for the audience. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? Well, give him the script. And he hands him the script.
Yeah, give him the screenplay.
They decide to help because Doc Hopper, played by Charles Durning, the Frog Legs magnate, is chasing them and looking for them in an old rusty Studebaker, Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem decide to paint it and they paint it while they sing the song Can You Picture That? And it's this gorgeous paint job that ends up looking a little bit like John Lennon's Rolls Royce from his glory days with the Beatles. It's just this psychedelic rainbow connection of a paint job.
Yeah, just commune hippie to the nines.
Yeah, much like Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem's Bus, which is a similar
Right. Yeah,
paint job.
they've done this before. This car is child's play after their bus.
I love that they get this elaborate paint job done. They hit the road. They're on the road literally 5 seconds, Dave.
I know. And the paint job is already does nothing.
Doc Hopper's right behind them in his car.
Yeah.
Hopper is saying to the driver, Max, his right-hand man, be on the lookout for a Studebaker with a bear and a frog. And he's like, oh, well, all I see is a frog and a bear and a rainbow-colored Studebaker.
Yeah.
Oh, so we see at a country fair, sort of, Elliot Gould makes a cameo.
Fantastic.
And he's running a beauty contest that is judged by Edgar Bergen, Candice Bergen's dad, who was, the first famous ventriloquist act on radio, which I don't know how that works. And Charlie McCarthy. Charlie McCarthy was his little puppet. And it was the last appearance of Edgar Bergen before his death.
He was there because Jim had been a lifelong fan.
Oh, it makes so much sense. It's a passing of the torch, kind of.
Exactly. And it's great that Jim said, be in this movie because it was the last opportunity. It was the last thing he was in.
Which, hey, guys, you love the Muppets. Here's where I came from. Here's what I grew up with.
Yeah.
I don't know what you make of this, but if Edgar Bergen died, didn't Charlie McCarthy die?
Yeah, it's with those guys. Well,
because it's not like the Muppets. It's not like, hey, this guy passed on. Why don't you do it, Robin? There's none of that. It's Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. So that was the last of that school, I think. He used to do him.
Charlie McCarthy gets to live the lifespan of his puppeteer, of his inventor and his puppeteer. I think Kermit's got another good 500 years in him.
Yeah, at least.
He's generational,
Thank God. So Elliot Gould is proctoring or hosting this beauty contest. One of the contestants and the eventual winner of the contest, out of nowhere, is Miss Piggy. And Miss Piggy, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't sit down and study. Miss Piggy's character looks a little different back then, doesn't she? Didn't she make a little more of an evolution? Yeah. Her eyes, her nose seemed longer.
I think they all change in small or larger ways. But yeah. Her eyes struck me. And also I noticed they had eyes for Miss Piggy being flirty, and they had eyes for Miss Piggy, kicking karate eyes.
Piggy. Karate eyes. That's great. It's like G.I. Joe with Kung Fu Grip. Also, I may cut this. This is untoward, but I never saw it before. But Miss Piggy had an odd sort of cleavage etched into her.
First time I'd ever seen it.
Me too.
Like a little W with a slightly longer center. First time I ever noticed this.
I don't remember it.
And it's also the kind of thing I would feel weird while I was researching it. Put into Google.
Yeah, don't Google Miss Piggy cleavage. You're going to get a whole different color. So Miss Piggy ends up singing a song, Never Before, Never Again. It was originally meant for Johnny Mathis, and then they decided it would be funnier to have Miss Piggy sing her own song, which is self-reverential about this, love. But yeah, not a memorable song, in my opinion.
I agree, which is why I was actually ready to say that while the song is not great, it provides some of the greatest soft focus Kermit and
dream sequence.
Dream scenes, in a field, in the rowboat. I'm sure all nods to certain things.
Yeah, famous romantic scenes are spoofed.
Running in a field, and Miss Piggy's momentum and what do you call the weight, mass plus velocity?
Yeah, carrying Kermit.
Yeah, Kermit is quickly, his direction is reversed, and she is basically running through him. Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's great. There's one dream sequence that kind of puzzled me. She's in a rowboat singing her song, and Kermit appears to be drowning.
Yeah.
He's a frog.
But
how is he drowning?
Several long, uncomfortable seconds of drowning frog.
Yeah, I couldn't figure that one out. Please let us know if Any of you know why he was or what it's
Kermit doesn't know
referencing?
how to swim.
He lives in a swamp. He's from the swamp. You
I
know,
saw.
there's a classic movie, and it wasn't referencing this, but it's called Leave Her to Heaven. The gorgeous Jean Tierney is in a rowboat, and she kind of quietly just watches as a character, a young boy, drowns. This wasn't that, but it
Right.
was calling that back to me in my head. And I'm like, what? But he's her love interest. What is going on? But it was bizarre enough. It was almost as bizarre as the cleavage etched in her chest, where I was just like, huh? Wait, he swims. Moving right along. So Miss Piggy, it's a great moment. She just, her eyes lock with Kermit and they kind of fall in love, mostly her, but him as well. I think he gets in over his head immediately because the power of her love is so overwhelming. I always felt about those two. Kermit is in love as far as like a peck on the cheek and holding hands, and she's in
Mhm.
love as in ravish me, Kermit. You know, that kind of
Right.
like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she is on board. He invites her to get ice cream, and she takes it to be he's inviting her to go to Hollywood with them. So they're all in the
Yeah.
car. They go to Hollywood. She already somehow has an agent out there, a manager that she's in contact with. At one point, she has a romantic dinner with Kermit. Steve Martin makes a cameo as the waiter. I was just going to say, I'm kicking myself. We skipped another cameo. Richard Pryor made a
Oh,
cameo at the
but you're
county
skipping it for
fair.
but
Oh,
like he's selling balloons. Like
he's
it's
selling
like,
balloons. He sells them to
I know.
Gonzo, and Gonzo
Yeah.
flies away because he talks him into buying a bunch of them. But they got Richard Pryor. That's how big this movie was.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
big the brand was at that time. People
It's
forget.
it's a thing though. It's how big the brand is, and there's a second advantage. It's times, it's like multiplied by this adorable Muppet thing. And it can work as, oh, I love them. Can I be in that movie?
Yeah.
And my kids would love it if I was in that movie.
Yeah, that's true.
So it like triples the amount of like pull you have for cameos.
Yeah.
And that's how you get Pryor and Coburn and the name I shall not mention until we get near the end.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
You also get, I just remembered, you get Bob Hope selling ice cream. I mean, yeah, the guest stars were giving shine to the Muppets and helping improve that brand, but it went the other way too. The Muppets were the hot new thing, and they were revitalizing. Someone like Bob Hope had another 5 to 7 years on television doing his specials, which were already
Mhm.
outdated.
Plus, the whole movie has a little Bob Hope, Bing Crosby feel. So
Yeah, it's a
it's a
road picture.
yeah, it's a road
Yeah.
pick.
The
Yeah.
road to Bali, the road to Utopia, the road to Hollywood with the Muppets.
Mm.
So while they're having their romantic dinner with the waiter played by Steve Martin, Miss Piggy gets a call from her agent. She goes off, or her manager. She goes off to take the call. Jump cut to later in the evening. Kermit's there. He's killed all the champagne, waiting for her. She's not there. He drags himself to the piano bar where Rolf is playing. And we get another song, Kermit and Rolf, both of which are voiced by Jim Henson. So he's doing a duet with himself. Does I
Mhm.
Hope That Something Better Comes Along,
Mhm.
which is basically, ugh, women.
Uh,
You
He
know?
says, he says, women, stay away from women. That's my motto. But I can't. I know that's my problem. And the
Yeah.
reason I know that line, and this is a weird thing, I was taping WLIR one day. And you
Mm.
know how the DJs would sometimes play snippets from things in between songs? One of the DJs was putting on the next song, but before they did, you heard Kermit say, like, she broke my heart. So it's that to and throw.
Wow.
When the song that you're talking about is about to start, on my mixtape, it goes, it all went wrong when I grew jealous. Squeeze, Last Time Forever.
I just want to interject very quickly. If any of you on YouTube are enjoying Dave's references of WLIR and Squeeze, in my older incarnation of Pop Culture Graveyard, I have a Squeeze episode and I have a WLIR episode. So
For
get on
crying out
that.
loud. Get on that.
Ah,
Yeah.
so,
Check the archives.
yeah. So, yeah, I hope that something better comes along. It's just two
Yeah.
guys who've had it.
And Rolf has always been a great, he's like the piano bar therapist. That thing that Rolf does.
Mm-hmm.
Rolf, not Ralph. Right.
Rolf. Yeah.
Yeah. And I believe because he's a piano player, he's one of them human hands puppets.
He is. And also,
Yeah.
because of him, he basically took over and became more of the piano man. He took over. Dr. Teeth became more of like a conductor of the band because Rolf
Mhm.
was kind of their Linus. He was like their piano character.
Yeah, yeah. All
So
right, so Kermit and Rolf,
Kermit and Rolf doing
they
their
do their
duet.
number.
And that's when Kermit finds out after that that Piggy didn't really stand him up or run out on him, but she was kidnapped by, I should say, Charles Durning plays the fried frog legs impresario. And Charles Durning is fantastic. He's basically the same character he played Pappy O'Dannell in Oh Brother,
Mm.
Where Art Thou? It's that kind of a Southern gentleman. As we said earlier, he's standing in for a Colonel Sanders type. He
And
has like
if
almost the golden arches. They're the green
Mhm.
legs.
Yeah, they have the green legs. And if none of these are ringing a bell for you, it's the Boss Hogg feel. Fro
Total. Sorrel
from
Book is rolling over in his grave that we didn't mention him until now. But yeah,
Yeah.
same tie, same white suit kind of.
Yeah, yeah, it's that, Dukes of Hazzard Boss Hogg feel. Yeah.
Yeah, he's now decided to hold Miss Piggy as his hostage until Kermit agrees to be his pitchman. And so he gets Kermit to come to where he is. He gives himself up. They tie both Piggy and Kermit up. And then they call in a mad scientist
An
played
evil
by,
German mad scientist.
yeah, your idol and mine, Mel Brooks.
Oh, yeah, he goes for the Gov thing on the back of the jacket.
He does from
Like,
Blazing Saddles, the same kind of
yeah,
thing. And the bat,
yeah.
Professor Max Krassman with a
He's
K.
a like
He's a
crass
crass
man.
man.
Yeah, yeah.
Mel Brooks has this thing that's going to melt Kermit's brain and make
So
him
that
a
he'll be
willing subject.
docile. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so he'll do his bidding. And Kermit tries to escape and can't. He's in the machine. He's about to get melted. And Miss Piggy clears house, karate wise.
Yeah. She's had too much.
Yep. She's had it up to her snout
Yeah.
with this doctor. Yeah. And beats them all up. It's a wonderful showcase of the dichotomy that is Piggy. She is the most ladylike, girlish, flouncy, old time charm school lady you're going to find. At the same time, she is cutthroat, mad temper, karate skilled, tomboy, kind of one of the fellas. Almost this Linda Ronstadt type.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, she can hang with the Eagles and drink tequila all night, but then she'll go on stage and be the most delicate creature you ever saw in your life.
Yeah, it's this combination of like ferocity and daintiness.
Yeah. I love that in the middle of the film, we revisit the movie theater because the machine eats the film. So we cut back, and that's when we find out that the chef, the Swedish chef, is the one who's playing the film.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's in there, hurty. And then at one point he goes, the film is flixed. and we get, I just love that interstitial thing.
Yeah.
Oh. So yeah, very meta.
Yeah, and being a movie full of puppets and star cameos being meta in 2024, nothing. This is 1979. Nobody knows what meta means.
Right.
They were there. They were being really cool. Like,
yeah,
it was a pretty neat thing to be doing at the time.
So at one point they exchanged a Studebaker with Milton Berle at a used car lot for another car.
Yeah.
And so this car breaks down on the side of the road. It looks like they're not going to make it to Hollywood. Kermit is dejected. He feels like he let everyone down. He goes on a little walkabout.
They do the night in the desert scene. I mean,
with a campfire.
With everything but psychedelic drugs. But it's totally it's time for some inner searching in the desert.
Right.
It's that scene. And
it's
Kermit
funny.
even sees himself and gets advice from himself. Maybe he licked himself to get into the right state.
He's one of those frogs.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned psychedelic drugs because Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem show up and they might have some.
Right. Maybe this explains a lot of the introspection everybody was having.
Yeah. So Kermit hears the music vaguely playing in the distance and he gets back to his group. The music gets louder and louder, and Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem have set up outside. It must have taken them forever to load out and set up, but they're
Yeah.
playing.
How did they find Kermit? They read the screen. What? We read the screenplay.
It's great.
And I love that no one says, so how does all this turn out?
I know. Also, I
just
was saying to myself, why didn't Kermit read it and be like, oh, well, later everything works out fine. Why am I dejected? Like,
it's that thing that Jim was like, Jim was very aware of that stuff. Like, if anyone were to actually out loud ask a question like that, Jim would turn to the camera and be like, do you not see all the puppets? Do you not know this is not serious? You're like,
right. Also, various Muppets on the show and in all the movies have different lines that are all basically the same line, which is like, really? You're going to tug at that string?
that's what
Like,
really.
look at what we're doing here. You haven't suspended disbelief yet?
Yeah.
So Electric Mayhem are driving the whole cast in their bus, their tour bus. They get pulled over by a motorcycle cop. It's not a motorcycle cop. It's Max, Doc Hopper's henchman. And he was in the costume out of the goodness of his heart to warn them all that he's hired killers. And one killer in particular who has never met a frog he couldn't kill. And if he turns him down, he's going to end up killing him because he has this assassin. Kermit says that there's a ghost town that he's going to go to and he's going to wait for him for a showdown.
They're going to have a showdown in an Old West ghost town.
How great is that?
It's great. I mean, especially right after that psychedelic desert scene. Tarantino is probably like, wow, this is a love letter to filmmaking.
Yeah. Well, too, what does that say to kids about what do you do with a bully? Do you run your entire life from them? Or do you have it out with them?
Yeah. Easier to do also now that you've accumulated some friends.
Right.
You have your back.
Yeah. And so he just wants to stand up to him alone. Doc Hopper and his henchmen are on one side of the street and Kermit is on the other by himself. And it's my favorite shot in the movie, Dave. We see Doc Hopper and all his henchmen in between the legs of Kermit with his little boots.
Yeah, little boots with little spurs. Yeah. I'll add real quick that within the henchmen are Jim Henson and Frank Oz.
Nice. Yeah. They deserve cameos.
To this day, I don't know which of those guys is them, but I know that.
Yeah, the beard was ubiquitous at Henson Studios back then.
Yeah.
So the showdown, Kermit tries to touch the heart of Doc Hopper.
This is Kermit's idea of having it out with his bully.
That's who he is.
Look at my friends. Look how nice it is to have friends. Are those your friends? Those people standing with you, are they your Hopper? I got friends. He looks back at Max and Max shakes his head.
Yeah.
Which is harsh.
I love it.
Max says, I'm not your friend. I love that Kermit's idea of a showdown is a last attempt to convince Doc Hopper to be a good guy.
Yeah. Doc Hopper has his men with guns and he has his frog killer assassin who has a fork gun or whatever. And Kermit has his folks behind him. Kermit makes his entreaty to Doc Hopper. He's going to, we think, melt his heart and make him see the light. And the ultimate respect paid to kids. You can't change everyone with kind words. Some people are just bad people or wrong people or irredeemably damaged.
Yeah.
Doc is like, all right, kill him. And
there's a good pause, at least.
There's a pause.
He thinks about it. And he goes, okay, kill him.
And he's only saved by Animal, who has eaten a bunch of growth pills created by Dr. Bunsen Honeydew.
Named after the Bunsen burner and Honeywell, I believe at the time was a major scientific company. Yeah.
Also, I'd like to think by the fact that his head is basically a honeydew melon.
All of their heads are honeydew melons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Animal has taken pills that make you huge. Unfortunately, the effects are only temporary. But by the way, we haven't used this term yet, and we really should have, in yet another amazing practical effect.
Oh, yeah.
We are introduced to 60-foot Animal.
Yeah.
Who bursts through the roof of a 3-story house.
Pre-CGI, the old-fashioned way. We just see his head and a little bit of his arms.
I think there's some fingers.
Yep. Just enough to scare off Doc and his crew and let our heroes continue on their way. So all of our heroes make it to Hollywood. They make it to the studio. They get into the outer office of the Kingpin. There's a secretary in the outer office, played by Cloris Leachman.
Love Cloris Leachman, and she's so
Love.
good. She's so good. And she's so beautiful. So many years I watched her playing up the ugly old lady routine. She's gorgeous.
I loved her from, of course, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, but also The Last Picture Show, Peter Bogdanovich's movie. She's great in that. And she had Phyllis, her own spinoff, which I enjoyed the first season of. And coming off of the Mel Brooks film a few years earlier, Young Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which she was masterful in.
Frau
Anyway,
Brucha. I think her name meant glue. That's why the horses got upset. It was like German for glue. Yeah.
That's great. So she is barring them all from entering.
Classic, you can't see him without an appointment. Yeah.
Classic. And it turns out she is allergic and begins sneezing. She's allergic to
dander, Muppet dander.
Muppet dander. In no time, they realize this, and there's a fan behind them, and they're all shivering to create more dander.
Shake, everybody, shake.
More practical effects. She
succumbs to the dander. Yeah.
Thank you.
In a beautiful, overacted, brilliant. Like, just a great succumbing to her allergies.
That's what you get. It's one of the best cameos, performance-wise.
Yeah.
So she lets them all into the office. And Dave, the kingpin of this studio, is played by my all-time beloved idol, Orson Welles.
There's a shot of that chair not facing you. That shot is long. This whole movie has been saying, I wonder who that's going to be. I wonder who the owner of that's going to be. I wonder who the head of that's going to be. And now you've come to the Oz moment. Who's Oz going to be?
Yeah. The thing about Orson Welles at that time, he was experiencing somewhat of a renaissance at that time. For years, he was this broke, down on his luck guy who had created, of course, Citizen Kane, Magnificent Ambersons, a number of pictures. And then he became kind of lost in the wilderness. He was living with Peter Bogdanovich for a couple of years, free of charge because he needs taken care of. He had lost favor with people. By this point, he had a renaissance. Citizen Kane was rediscovered and hailed as the masterpiece it is. He was killing it on the talk show circuit. He was doing voiceovers for Paul Masson Wines. He was doing voiceovers in lots of movies. He was doing documentaries. He was also doing Dean Martin roasts. That's how big he was. So it is a big reveal.
It's a huge reveal. And, I'm sure it's lost on, I feel sorry for a 25-year-old who's waiting for that chair to turn around, and it turns around and they're going, okay, it sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Like, is that canon?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big deal. And I think it goes over fantastically. I'm sure in 1979 it was huge.
Oh.
And I wish I knew, how well did they keep that a secret?
Oh, I'm sure a lot of the cameos were, low profile.
Kept secret, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
On Twitter, Orson Welles is like, I'm doing a thing. I can't really talk about it.
Yeah. There's none of that. So Orson, of course, plays it beautifully. And Kermit is like, I'm here to be rich and famous.
We are here to be rich and famous.
We are here to be rich and famous. And Orson calls his secretary and it's like, Miss whatever, would you please bring me the rich and famous contract?
For Kermit and Company.
For Kermit and Company. Oh.
Yeah. For Kermit the Frog and Company, I think he says.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, is that it? Is that it? And the answer is, yeah, that's it. And they celebrate. They're like, we did it. Then you get more meta. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Orson's name in it is Lou Lord.
That's like a hats off, right?
Yeah, because Sir Lou Grade was the head of ATV, which was the British company that co-produced the original Muppet Show.
That's what I was saying earlier. The British company, because the U.S. companies turned it down.
Right. And I know Sir Lou Grade from a failed TV movie, Raise the Titanic, which I loved as a kid, but of course was a massive flop. And it was like a joint production of British and US companies. It lost millions of dollars. And Lou Grade had this great quote at the time that said, it would have been cheaper to lower the ocean. So that's who they were like.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, then we go meta again because we're in this empty theater, this very Brechtian kind of thing where we see the sets being flown in, and they're all
And now it's
sets.
time to make the movie,
It's time to
the
make the
one we
movie,
just watched.
but they have two-dimensional stage versions of the sets that we just watched in the movie, like the swamp and
And
the
the
church.
sign for the El Slizo Cafe goes
Oh,
by.
it's great.
Palm trees go by. Yep.
Yup.
The song for that is a reprise of Rainbow Connection, I think.
Oh, yeah.
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 We kind of didn't mention what's his name? The big giant 7-foot guy with the
Jack.
mouth. Sweetums.
Sweetums.
Sweetums is the monster. Oh, right. Yes. I'm sorry. Jack, played by Sweetums.
Oh,
Jack
okay,
is,
yeah.
he's like, Jack's not my name. It's
Right.
what I am. I'm a
Right.
Jack. That's played
Right.
by Sweetums. And he comes bursting, when the movie says the end, he comes
Mm,
bursting through it.
right.
Um,
So I believe he's an ogre of sorts,
I
a
believe, yeah,
hairy
he
ogre.
seems like an ogre. Yeah. He's the reason they get a deal on a car. He slaps a decimal, taking it from
He,
thousands of dollars to a little less than a dozen.
yeah, 11.95. He swats a fly and it becomes the decimal
Oh,
point
right. That's what it
in the
is.
middle
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
numbers. In closing, Dave, do you think this film specifically, because in my estimation, the Muppet films just got better and better, do you think this film, the Muppet movie, would hold up with kids today, attention span wise and every other way wise?
Yeah, that's a tough call. It
Hmm.
might almost have become a movie more suited to adults.
To people of a certain
Uh,
age.
yeah, I think it may
Yeah.
have gotten there over, and that's not to. I'm not taking away from it. It's so good.
No,
Um,
it's great.
and while all those Muppet movies are great, I forget who, but there is someone who says that Muppet Christmas Carol is the most true telling of
Hmm.
the of
Original
that
Dickens
story.
story.
Yeah,
Yep.
of the
It is the
so
most
I
faithful.
it's the most faithful telling. So I will repeat that what I heard there. I do think that they're all really good, and I saw the Jason Segel one. I thought that was pretty good too.
Yeah.
But there's a thing about practical effects, and the
Right.
less is more. And this really holds up as a good original, as a good first. And the
I
others aren't remakes; they're expansions.
right.
Expansion
I
packs.
I think you can't go wrong with any Muppet TV show or movie from the 70s through 80s. After that, it's
Yeah,
a case by case basis.
yeah.
In closing, there's a lot to recommend about this movie. It's got great set pieces, it's got some great songs. I think as an introduction to the Muppets as a thing, it'll make you want to see more Muppet stuff. Like, I think this will get you into the show. Originally, the show got you into wanting to see the Muppets on film. I think it'll have the
Mm.
reverse effect here. You'll want more of them and you get more in the show.
Yeah, and just go ahead. Like if you haven't seen any of them, just go ahead and watch that. Watch the one we just watched. There's nobody on Reddit asking what order to watch the Muppet movies in. What's the canonical order? What's the best order?
Yeah, I don't want to be lost. I was just going to say all the cameos in the movie set you up for wanting to see them interact with celebrities, and then you go and watch the show, and it's hosted by a different celebrity like Vincent Price, like Mark Hamill. You're going to love the show.
Yeah, it works both ways. It works both ways, no problem. And
Hmm.
at the time, I'm sure they were saying like people are used to seeing these Muppets be funny with famous people. We'll give you 9, 10 episodes of the Muppet Show within this movie by bringing in 9, 10 stars for them to interact with. Kermit, when Kermit's nephew whispers to him, "Is this really the story of how all the Muppets met?" And he says, like, basically, like not exactly,
Yeah.
but basically, and that tells you, like, watch it. It's a great origin story, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then after
Um,
that, you'll be able to say things like, "Did you know that Gonzo used to be a plumber?"
yeah. Oh God, I'm glad we didn't touch on Gonzo and the chickens because that whole relationship bothers me.
Yeah.
I don't know how to even get into that. What is
My,
Gonzo? Where does Gonzo come from? What is with the chickens?
well, the chickens thing. I want to know why the chickens aren't going on strike on set because here's this whole movie about this imaginary frog leg problem. Like,
Hmm.
there's a few French restaurants out there serving frog legs, but, but chickens, man, they're out in the real world. Those chickens dealing with actual chicken leg problems. This is an actual problem
Oh,
for them.
moving right along.
Oh, moving right along.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Dave. This
What's the in
was
between? Is it diggy? Like, how do you? What is the
moving right along.
spelling?
Chugga chug chugga chug. I
Because I
think
feel like you
so.
could even just shorten it to that and not say moving right along. And if someone's taking their time with something, you can be like, chug, 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 chug.
Yeah.
Let's move it right along.
It's an evergreen. All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Hollis.
I will see you in the funny papers.
I'll see you in those
Hollis and
funny
Dave
papers.
would like to thank you for enjoying Pop Culture Graveyard.